Well, that was close. What are you talking about? That game wasn't that close. We won. How could you possibly be complaining? Can't you see? Gray jersey. It's kind of my job to complain. This is like the alter ego of complaining shirt. Hey, a win's a win, no matter how ugly it is, so just move on with your life. It's still the preseason. It's okay. The other guy seems pretty happy. We gotta win. I don't care. It's the preseason. We gotta win. Let's go. Yeah. Yeah. It's that. That right there is why we disagree. That's right, folks. Vegas Golden Knights win 4-3 over the Arizona Coyotes in preseason game number 5. It got a little dicey there towards the end, but all in all, it was a very exciting game. The lineup for the Golden Knights looked drastically different than I'm sure most of us expected for at this point in the preseason. Given there's only 2 exhibition contests left, one would expect that this is about when the roster would start to look like it will on October 11th. That being said, that is not how it looked tonight with a lineup of Cotter, Waugh, Kolasar, Howden, Carlson, Amadio, Quinney, Mannin, and Dorofeev, Primu, Lecision, Ronbjerg, with Bischoff and Whitecloud, Hutton and Korzak, and Hayes and Pahal on the back end. And the goaltending battle was Adin Hill in his second consecutive start, looking to get a little bit of a redemption game following the 7-3 loss against his former team in San Jose Sharks, and a familiar face for the Golden Knights this preseason in the form of Jonas Johansson. Now, that name may sound familiar. You may be saying, doesn't he play for the Colorado Avalanche? And yes, he has played for the Avs twice this preseason against the Golden Knights, but he was claimed off of waivers by the Arizona Coyotes on Friday, I'm sure to shore up one of their many goaltending issues, or to be flipped away for draft picks sometime near the trade deadline. But he was in net for the Coyotes tonight. It was very clear that this game was going to go a little bit differently than the preseason game number 4 for the Golden Knights, pretty much right from the drop of the puck. The game started off kind of slow in the first couple of seconds, like most hockey games do, especially when the Golden Knights are icing a much younger team. But clearly, Pavel Dorofeev didn't get the memo that he's supposed to be young and timid and scared of the NHL. Because just 2 minutes into the game or so, he streaks up the left side of the ice and absolutely belts it off the post behind Jonas Johansson. He had him beat, and it was on the scary side of the post too. So clearly, he came to skate, he came to play early. And this was really what capped off a really solid start for the Golden Knights. While they didn't really muster a lot of shots in the early first couple of minutes of the game, they really dominated the play. And what makes this break-in for Dorofeev really interesting is he had Sakari Mannin on his right wing and opted to, call his own number and take the shot and ultimately fired it off the post. Would Mannin have scored? Possibly. But I like the confidence from young Pavel Dorofeev. And clearly the Golden Knights were able to continue to build off of whatever they were able to gain from the start by proceeding to give up the next 4 shots on net. Adin Hill looked really solid in the initial part of this game. Anything to give him some confidence after the fact that he got, shelled in the last game. We have to give him the benefit of the doubt, given that he had played like 3 games since March going into the last preseason game. So clearly this would be a good opportunity for him to get his feet back under him after getting blown out. And over the first 5-6 minutes, he fielded a couple of shots, no issue. The Golden Knights were really able to turn the period on its head pretty early on, with about 9 minutes elapsed into the game. Zach Hayes just came flying down the center of the ice, and received a really good pass from Amadio, and just fired it posted in past Jonas Johansson off the right post under the blocker. What makes this play really interesting is that Mannin really set it up by causing a really, really, really egregious turnover at the blue line by the Arizona Coyotes, ultimately feeding the puck to Michael Amadio, who ultimately would give it to Zach Hayes, who would end up potting the game's opening goal at 8:53 of the first period. Hayes from Amadio and Mannin. This was just a good way to get started. Getting on the board early, doing it in style, and doing it as a good passing play, and ultimately just some smart play from a player who's hoping to crack the roster at some point, a bottom 6 forward in the form of Michael Amadio, and Zach Hayes, who is just hanging on to the bottom of the depth chart, having been assigned to the Henderson Silver Knights earlier this week. So one would think that this would be a good opportunity for the Knights to settle down a little bit. Unfortunately, Nicholas Waugh didn't get the memo, and he took a hooking penalty at 10:46. Arizona really dominated the first minute of this power play, landing a handful of shots, But that was really it. Their second wave wasn't really able to accomplish much, and the Golden Knights' box defensive penalty killing strategy appears to be working pretty well in the early phases against the Arizona Coyotes. So we get towards the middle of the first period, and this is where the period tends to slow down, and clearly Zach Hayes has other ideas because he has come to play. There's just a bunch of wholesale changes in the neutral zone. The Arizona Coyotes are changing what I assume is 4 players as they left the entire left side of the ice wide open, where Zach Hayes is able to find a seam, take a pass from Ben Hutton, get to the top of the circle, and just take a slap shot akin to Alex Pietrangelo a couple of games ago in the shootout, and just rifle it past him off the right post or off the left post this time, and in under Johansson's glove. So that is 2 goals in a row for the Golden Knights, both off the stick of Zach Hayes. What I find really interesting is that Hayes isn't exactly a prolific goal scorer, and he never was, even with the Henderson Silver Knights last year. In the first period of this preseason game, he equaled the amount of goals he scored in the entire regular season with the HSK last year. So clearly, he had some good development over the offseason, or he just liked the matchup he was getting against the Coyotes. Either way, that's a good thing for a young player and for an organization that, while not being starved of offensive defensive players, we have a lot of strong defensive prospects. What it does is it allows him to differentiate himself from the group. This second goal really kicked off a run of about 5 minutes of really solid offense by the Golden Knights, with really good chances from Carlson and Primo over the course of the next 4 or 5 minutes. And really that kind of settled the game down. That was with one notable exception. There was a really, really solid passing play on a bit of a defensive breakdown by the Coyotes where we lost the puck behind the net on a kind of a partial break-in. And they were able to center the puck out to the middle, and Hill did a really good job going from his left to his right on his knees in the butterfly position and just making what appeared to be a routine save, but watching it back slowly, it was anything but routine. Clearly, Adin Hill was very locked in at the start of this game, and that's really good to see as a fan, given that he's in the running for the starting job, and Logan Thompson has a pretty serious leg up after his performances early in the preseason, and Hill's giving up a 7 spot in his last start. So with that being said, that kind of brought the first period to an end. The one thing that stood out early was that this is a completely different Adin Hill. He looked very calm, very in control, almost similar to the way Robin Lehner played a couple of years ago when he was new to the Golden Knights, before, he got riddled with injury and got his confidence shaken by whether it be Coach Pete DeBoer or a rather ungrateful fan base. That being, he just looked solid. He looked, he's a big guy, so he doesn't need to do a lot of movement, and yet he just kept a lot of rebounds to himself. The pucks were sticking to him. It was just a good, solid bit of work for the first period. Zach Hayes obviously was having a really good game up to this point, given that he had, scored 2 goals and had recorded the majority of the Golden Knights shots on a player-to-player basis, leading the Golden Knights in shots at the time. That being said, the Golden Knights were struggling in a couple of the major categories. They were being outshot 13-11. They were only 18% from the faceoff dot in the first period, and the game was dead even at 15 hits apiece. So we were losing the shot total, getting demolished at the dot, and was pretty even on the physicality, which this game was very physical, especially for a preseason tilt. Now, getting into the second period is where the game either went really bad if you're a Golden Knights fan or really good if you're an Adin Hill fan. It would be an understatement. It would be the understatement of the century to say that the Golden Knights came out and played a solid second period. Adin Hill was absolutely under siege to start. We barely landed anything. The Coyotes essentially had the puck in the zone, pounding Hill and crashing the net for the first 7 minutes of the period. And it was just really terrifying. Hill had to make a lot of really good saves first 2, 3, 4 minutes fresh out of the intermission. And at that point, he looked really, really, really good. That was until the hockey gods decided to say, you know what, this shutout's really fun and all, but we're going to do something to screw it up for you. As Matias Michelli put the Arizona Coyotes on the board, putting them only down by 1 with a score of 2-1. The Coyotes were finally able to get a clean entry and take advantage of a incredibly fortunate bounce off the leg of Adin Hill. Now, the initial shot that wound up setting up this goal, coming from Patrick Nemeth, was just a low shot that hit Hill right in the left leg,
But ultimately, it kicked up, and Michelli just happened to be there, and it went in off of his skate. Now, I'm not sure if the play was initially reviewed for a distinct kicking motion, but the commentators for the Golden Knights, which I believe it was, I think it was Gary Lawless, who said that it was a kicking motion right up until he saw the other angle, and he said it wasn't. So it was just a very unfortunate situation, given that Hill did everything in his reasonable power to prevent this puck from going in, and yet ultimately just the hockey gods said, no, that's just not what we're going to do here. Tough break. And so that was Michelli from Nemeth and Hayton at 4:20 of the second period. Now, one would think that the hockey gods had had enough of laughing at our own misfortune in net. That was until about a minute and 40 seconds later when Barrett Hayton tied the game 2-2. And this goal just made me shake my head. Obviously, you may recall back in the last game, Hill had the puck go off the back glass and then off his back and in, and I thought that was the most forgivable goal he will ever give up. Well, this one is probably the least forgivable goal he will give up for a very long time. Coyotes just dump the puck into the zone. Hill ranges behind the net to play it. And instead of going it to either of the two defensemen on either side of him, he decides to try and fire the puck right at the middle, hitting an Arizona defenseman right in the chest, who, to Hill's credit, he gets back and makes the initial save, and he does a really good job while doing it. That being said, Zach Hayes gets horrendously outworked and whiffs on the clearing attempt, and Barrett Hayton's able just to tap it right in through Adin Hill, thus making the game 2-2. The stat line reading Hill from Gunther at 6:01 of the second period. This start to this period looked an awful lot like what happens when I try and play a goalie career mode on NHL 22. I make a lot of incredible saves sometimes, but then either the CPUs start doing some crazy stuff to make sure that my team goes to overtime, or I make a boneheaded mistake and give up the world's softest goal. Now, that's exactly what happened over the last minute and 40-odd seconds of game time for the Golden Knights in this second period. There's nothing really anyone could do, and one would think this would be a wake-up opportunity for the Knights' defense core to kind of kick it in gear. Nope. The stats were very lopsided. Through 7 minutes into the period, the Coyotes were out shooting us 15-2. That's just insanity. That's ridiculous amount of shots. It's good for Hill because he's getting, reps and he's feeling good about it, but giving up 2 goals, both of which not coming off of sticks, is kind of a testament to how kind of fast and loose the game was at this point. Fortunately, the Golden Knights would get a little bit of a break in terms of finally being able to go on the power play, where Carcone got called for hooking at 6:45, so pretty shortly after the goal. I have 2 issues with this penalty. 1, it wasn't a hook, it was a check to the head. And 2, he took Quinney's head off. Quinney wound up leaving the game, and he never returned. So I have no idea how it was a hooking when it was a check to the head and there was no hook, and I don't know how it wasn't a 5-minute major. Now, odds are the Office of Player Safety is going to take a look at this hit because it's questionable at best, but it was just one of those moments that was very unexpected for a preseason game. The Golden Knights were able to take this ensuing power play, and while they weren't able to muster a lot of shots, if any, because they finished with no shots on net, they had a lot of good zone pressure, which is a solid thing for a power play that's starting to try and build chemistry, especially with a lot of younger players on it. Now, all this good momentum was kind of quelled by yet another penalty when Paul Cotter took a slashing penalty at 9:10. Arizona had a lot of really good passing plays, and it really broke down the Golden Knights' defensive box on this penalty kill, so much so to the point that they were able to get a lot of high-quality chances, but of course, as has been the case through the first half of this game, Adin Hill is just on another plane of existence, being the best goaltender he could be. So what really sums this up is with about 8 minutes to go, there's just an absolute melee in front of the net for a loose puck, and Hill just exerts his dominance. He sets himself down in front of the net and makes sure that nobody's able to squeak the puck by him. This became a very overwhelming theme. At this point, the shots are 19-2 in favor of the Coyotes just for the second period. So we're getting like Montreal of November last year when we didn't record a single shot in the first period. And that was a regular season game with our full roster. That being said, it was just kind of a blech. Aside from Hill, the rest of the team was just kind of bleh, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The Golden Knights were able to muster a lot of good chances towards the back end of the period, following a little bit of a scuffle that wound up putting the Golden Knights on the power play with Pahal and Carcone and Kolyachonok all getting roughing penalties. That is 2 penalties for the Coyotes, 1 penalty for the Knights at 16:23. Knights weren't able to do a lot on this power play again. They were just getting a little too cute, trying to set up the perfect pass and try and pass the puck into the net. Wound up not recording a shot. That wound up being the last eventful moment of the second period. And I've really got to tip my hat to Adin Hill. He made 25 saves in that period. The really only other stat that matters is the fact that the Knights were outshot 27-5 when the horn sounded for the second period. That is a VGK record for preseason shots against. So the fact that it is still 2-2 and neither of Arizona's goals came on actual shots, it proves that either one, it could be 2-0 and Hill could have made 27 saves, or the more obvious, they shouldn't have gotten 27 shots in the first place. So obviously there's a lot of corrections to make going into the third period. And with the third period, it really didn't take long for the Knights to start getting back into the game that they showed early on in the first period. And it doesn't hurt that you get a really early power play with Gunther taking a hooking penalty just 11 seconds into the third period. It was a really solid power play for the Knights with a lot of good momentum and, strong passing plays, strong opportunities, plenty of action, but no goal, recording 4 shots. Now, if you're scoring at home or even if you're alone, that is twice as many shots in 2 minutes as they recorded in 20 minutes of previous game time. So that's a step in the right direction already. Got to be feeling good. Following the power play, there was a really good opportunity from Ronbjerg on a quick 2-on-1 break. If there was a rebound on that shot of by Johansson, it absolutely would have been a goal, no questions, because there was no way that he was going to be able to get across, as it was a bit of a juicy rebound, just a little bit too hot for the other man on the break. And then there was another really good opportunity by Dorofeev on a partial breakaway about 8 minutes into the period. But beyond that, the Knights were really just kind of floundering a little bit. They were doing a lot of things right in the offensive zone, but weren't really able to muster a really good scoring opportunity. That was until Pavel Dorofeev became Pavel Skorofeev. Yes, I know I stole that right from the Knights Twitter page, and put the Knights up 3-2. This play, while it was an incredible effort from Dorofeev going off the right post and in under Johansson's blocker, I've really got to give props to Sakari Manninen, who allowed the play to develop and waited for the perfect pass to get Dorofeev in basically all by himself. Whereas he basically waited on the boards, let Dorofeev slip past the defenseman, let the play develop, proceeds to hit him with a perfect tape-to-tape pass, and Dorofeev just goes over the blocker, no questions, goal, celebrate, do all the things, hooray. Stat line reading, Dorofeev from Manninen and Howden at 12:07 of the third period. Now, 3-2, good score. Now it's time to just lock it down. And this really kind of goes back to the point that is the most outstanding of this third period, is that they were far more in control of the game when compared to the second period. Now, I know the second period's not a good example to take, given that they surrendered 27 shots, only getting 5 on their own. But the tenor of the game was very different in the second period as opposed to this third period, which mirrors a lot more of the early first period when Zach Hayes was doing Zach Hayes things. So we wanted to figure that the game would start to cool off a bit, and then Nick Waugh decided in his eternal wisdom to take another hooking penalty away from the play at 16:02. And when you're up late in the game, you've got to expect that the other team's going to pull the goalie. And that's exactly what happened, as the Golden Knights were able to do a good job killing off the first 45 seconds of the power play. But ultimately, when the Coyotes got the puck in the zone, they pulled Johansson, getting the 6th attacker out there. And it wasn't long after the 6th attacker got out there that the Coyotes engaged in a really good passing play, and Alex Chiasson was able to tie the game on the power play. It was a really good passing play inside the box. It helps that there was 2 more Coyotes than there were Knights. And so, it sucks because it ties up the game, and the game looks like it's going to be going to overtime, given that up until this point the scales have kind of tilted. Prior to this power play for the Coyotes, they had really started to dominate the play, hence why they drew the penalty anyway. So me in my chair was kind of concerned that this game would either go to overtime or we would wind up losing in regulation. on whatever kind of crazy bounces the hockey gods had in store. That being said, that wound up not being what happened because it was really quickly off the face-off for, to be more precise, 17 seconds, that William Karlsson put the Golden Knights up 4-3. Now, this was a really bad turnover by the Coyotes in their defensive end, but what we've really got to do is admire the work of one young player and one slightly more familiar player. Now, I know Michael Amadio is no spring chicken by comparison to some of the other players on the roster tonight, but he's still young when compared to his more senior teammate in William Karlsson. Now, Amadio forces this turnover on the far boards and is able to chip it to the center, where Karlsson seems to summon a 2017 William Karlsson moment where he was more known as Wild Bill and fires it long side on Jonas Johansson. Now, this was a really pretty goal, and it really flashed me back to almost 6 years ago now when he was putting up 43. And hopefully this is an indicator of what he's got this season, because as we've heard all preseason, he worked on a shot all summer. And if this is what he meant by working on a shot, he might actually put up 20 this year, which would be awesome. So Karlsson from Amadio and Pahal at 1802, that really sucked all the wind out of the sails for the Coyotes and put a lot of energy back in the fortress. And that was all she wrote. The Golden Knights were able to kill off the remainder of the 6-on-5 with very little, if any, event, and were able to bring it home with the final score of 4-3. So now that the game is over, we can look at the sum of the game in a bit of retrospect. The first stat that really jumps off the page, and honestly my first star of the game, has got to be Adin Hill, more like Adin Mountain at this point. He made 50 saves. I'm not sure if that's a record for the Golden Knights preseason, but I've got to assume 50 saves is a record, so I'm just going to go ahead and call it a record. Good job, Adin Hill, on a Golden Knights preseason record, 50 saves. That's a really, really, really confidence-inspiring moment. Now, it's pretty clear that Logan Thompson still has a leg up in the goaltending fight this preseason, given that he didn't give up 7 goals in his last start and he's only allowed like 1 or 2 goals the entire preseason. That being said, Adin Hill was able to really strongly and bounce back from what was a really shaky game against the Sharks a couple of nights ago and put up what was arguably one of the more complete goaltending performances despite giving up 3 goals. 50 saves is 50 saves. 53 shots is 53 shots. And that's a lot to be taking on a night, but it is the preseason and he hasn't played in a while. So what I can only assume is he was very happy to get that much work. And from the little bit of film I saw where it was zoomed in enough for me to read Hill's expression, he looked like he was having the time of his life. 50 saves is 50 saves, and at that point it just feels like practice, and he made it look like practice tonight. So it was a really good game for Adin Hill, and I'm really excited to see him put up a game that he's capable of talent-wise. The one thing that I kind of have to hark on and be a little bit critical is the Golden Knights' defensive structure in this game. The majority of the Coyotes' goals either came on mistakes or the defensive block breaking down on a penalty kill. And giving up 27 shots in the second period is kind of unforgivable. Breaking your structure down that badly to where they were able to essentially manhandle the Golden Knights throughout the entire period is not exactly confidence inspiring. But again, this is a much younger lineup and there was 10 NHL regulars in the press box. So I wouldn't be so concerned with the way the structure is being implemented in the new Bruce Cassidy defense. Now back to the positive side of thing. That last goal, as I mentioned earlier, could this be the return of 2017, 2018 William Karlsson? Because he's looked really solid all preseason, and that goal really shows that, 1, he's got the clutch gene still, and 2, his shot's pretty good. So hopefully that's indicative of things to come this coming regular season, given that we know he's going to be a middle 6 staple all year. And the most interesting thing to take away from this game is Paul Cotter really going to be the guy? Because he has been absolutely stunning all preseason. He's played in every preseason game. He's looked good in every preseason game. And while he didn't score in this game like he did early on in the preseason, he's looked really good this whole time. The real issue with him is because he's no longer waiver exempt, he's going to have to be sitting in the press box a lot if he's not playing. And given that there's a lot of strong competition as well as a lot of NHL talent in the lineup in the form of Amadio and Howden and obviously with Kolesar being on the bottom 6, the only question mark being Will Carrier's status given that he's been injured for the majority of training camp. That might be the only in for Paul Cotter at the moment, but I really hope he's able to find his way onto the NHL roster for the Golden Knights at some point early in the season to keep capitalizing off of this strong preseason, because if not, if we send him down, he's immediately going to get claimed off of waivers, and we will have lost another talented player through the waiver process. So that's really the only scary thing to deal with Paul Cotter. But beyond that, I'm really thrilled with how he's played all preseason. So ultimately, it's a good game for the Golden Knights. It was ugly in the middle, but they wound up getting through it, getting bailed out by good goaltending and some late game heroics from William Karlsson. Tell me where you've heard that one before. So thanks for watching this video. If you like it, be sure to subscribe. I'm going to do this after every game. If you like it, like the video, do all the things, hit all the buttons. I greatly appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next one.